The University of Sydney's Vice-Chancellor, Mark Scott, finally admitted fault in the way he and the university had handled those anti-Israel encampments.
The testimonials are heartbreaking and unacceptable, and for that I am sorry. If students have felt unsafe or unwelcome, if that has been their lived experience, if that is their testimony, then we have failed them.
It is their testimony.
Yes.
Professor.
Well, no, that's exactly right, Senator, and
so
that's
you
why.
have failed them.
Yes.
Now, despite the fact that those encampments lasted for 2 months and that admission, Scott is refusing to step down even today when it's been revealed that he was allegedly dismissive, arrogant and condescending towards Jewish leaders when they raised their concerns about the ongoing hostilities on campus. Joining me now to discuss this and more, Sky News contributor Chris Uhlmann. Chris, I know that the uni has disputed this characterisation of the meeting that Scott had with Jewish leaders, but what's clear is that he didn't act decisively enough or quickly enough to stamp out what was going on, that these protests clearly intimidated Jewish staff and students. I mean, is his position untenable?
Well, Peter, in full disclosure up front, Mark Scott is a friend of mine. I've known him for nearly 20 years. The kind of behaviour that's described about him is not the way I understand the man to be. I've always found him to be someone who listened attentively to people who had problems. That's not to say, though, that he hasn't himself admitted that there have been issues at Sydney University and he's found himself wanting. So whether or not he should step down, I'll leave to his own conscience on that. Underline it and say that around the world we have seen that universities haven't been up to the mark on this. They've clearly been conflicted about the problems that they have on their own campuses. There are many people in their own faculties who are very pro-Palestine and some of them who are pro-Hamas. Now, what we have seen has been completely unacceptable. Those students, clearly Jewish students, have clearly felt under threat and they haven't been properly protected on the campus environment. Now, that is an indictment of universities, not just Sydney University, but the ANU and other universities around Australia and around the world. People have a right to be able to protest, but people also have a right to feel safe, and particularly on a campus.
Around the world, those university heads, though, have gone. We've seen 3 of the big Ivy League university heads go, Chris, and we know how much money, directly and indirectly, universities, particularly the Group of 8, get from taxpayers. I mean, let's play it in his favour. Let's say he wasn't as described. Nonetheless, it went on for a couple of months. Nonetheless, he's been forced to apologise. I mean, we demand that ministers fall on their sword and take responsibility. I think that's also something we've got to put on our universities.
Oh, no doubt, and I think that they're all fair questions to ask. All I do is make the point that the man is a friend of mine, so I'm not going to be someone who's going to be calling for his dismissal, but this is now a matter for the board which oversees that university and for Mark Scott's own conscience, and no doubt he's been thinking long and hard about it, and I think, as you've pointed out, that testimony before the Senate does show that he has considered his own actions on this and has found himself wanting at times.
All right, let's go to the news this morning that the United States is considering a ban on Chinese-made smart car software and hardware. This is for their domestic market. It would hit the EV manufacturer BYD, but also some 140 other Chinese brands about to hit the market. Our government says it's watching the situation very closely, given the national security implications. Well, I know this gives you an alignment of 2 things you are deeply engaged on, the issue of China and security and technology. We've seen concerns about drones. We're seeing real concerns about Chinese-made security cameras. What do you think of this move?
Well, I think I can start this one by saying the Chinese Communist Party is clearly not a friend of mine, and I act with great caution about everything that party does. And look, the thing is that China will be what China is. It's a communist state. Everything in the state is bent towards the service of the party. The only thing the party is really concerned about is its own survival, and particularly above all of that, the one man who runs the party, Xi Jinping. So would China use any of its technologies to spy on the West? Well, of course it would. On the United States, of course. On Australia, of course. It's constantly using those means to pick up as much information as it can. I might add, by the way, that when we have the opportunity to do that, we do the same thing. I think one of the things about Huawei we saw in the past was when the security agencies were asking themselves the question, what would We do if we had the same access to networks. They knew precisely the answer to that question. So yes, there is reason to be concerned about all of those things, and all of those things will be bent towards the service of the state if the state sees a use in that.
Let's take the situation of the cars. If you wanted to invade a country and you know that most of the vehicles in that country have got Chinese-made software, you turn it off so no one can get their transportation to move around. The cars don't work, the military vehicles don't work, everything's shut down. You've got Chinese software, let's say, in our water supply. You send out false readings to say the water supply is contaminated, even if it's not. And then you paralyse a city that has no drinking water. You could do the same thing on your energy. You could do the same thing on the tolls, on highways. You could close off roads. I mean, the way in which technology is so embedded in our life, Chris, and the fact that so much of it's coming out of China, this is a real concern. I just don't know that we're waking up enough to it and taking steps to have non-Chinese alternatives in our manufacturing supply chain.
And here's the problem, Peter. We've simply ceased to make things. We outsourced everything to China. It became the manufacturer of the world. It's now developed skill sets that we no longer have. And look at things like cameras. We know the Hikvision cameras that are used in security. 900 of them were found in the Defence Department. You don't think that they might have been put to some use? There's an interesting thing too, is that the Obamas have become film producers, you might note. And one of the films that they brought out last year had an array of Teslas that had gone out of control that was simply slamming one into the other. Now, do you think that Barack Obama doesn't know a little bit about the way that the world might work, and that scene out of that show might be one that he has contemplated? So all of the things that you say are true. We are utterly and completely compromised, and I don't know how we wash this out of the system now. I think that's the real issue, and even if we wanted to, we couldn't make the things that we need because we've essentially deindustrialised.
You're right to point out that Obama link, because the water supply one I quoted before came out of a book, a fiction book, spy fiction book that I read, but co-authored by Bill Clinton, and I thought there was a ring of truth in that one as well. Hey, breaking news this afternoon, Labor has approved 3 new coal mines in the Hunter Valley. Clearly this is welcome, but after the Blaney gold mine decision, what do you make of it?
Well, the government has to recognise the fact that we get $127 billion a year of export income that comes by way of coal. By the way, check, this is black coal, this is export coal, obviously, out of New South Wales at the moment. Those people who are watching this program, 45% of the energy on the east coast of Australia, that's for the entire east coast of Australia, stretching down to Hobart and through to South Australia, is coming by way of black coal from New South Wales. So it's still an essential part of our energy mix. It's an essential part of the world's energy mix, and us exporting to countries like China, believe it or not, helps to cut the carbon emissions of those countries, because otherwise they'd get it from dirtier sources. So it's good that the government has recognised the central role that coal plays in our electricity system and in our export income. I think that a lot more realism is needed as we go through this energy transition, in the difficulty that we will have from moving from those reliable sources of power to a part-time grid, and the fact that coal will be in the system for a long time, and that natural gas will have to be in the system because it will be the backbone of the system that we're building, because it will be the only reliable source of power.
Chris Uhlmann, a pleasure as always.